Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let's go inside the Express, shall we? And it must have been a good 5-10 minutes before we've mentioned that man, Nigel Farage. Wanting to build bridges with the United States.
I'd build a bridge, and then I would put Nigel on it, and then I would just blow up this end, because I just needs to shut up. He just needs to shut up. He was not the leader of the Leave campaign, number one. He has not been and is not going to be appointed ambassador to the United States, number two. Number three, even if he was, it's an apolitical job and he has to do what the Prime Minister of the day in this country tells him to do. He's not there in order to make nicey with the other president at the other end of the world. He's got to do what Theresa tells him, and Theresa is going to tell him to shut up, fundamentally, and Nigel is incapable of shutting up. He needs to get back to work as my MEP and the MEP for 7 million other people in the southeast of the UK, where he's supposed to be in Brussels sitting in votes, which half the time he's never in.
I somehow think your plea to Nigel Farage to shut up is probably going to fall on deaf ears.
You know,
I mean, it's quite interesting. I actually wrote about this this morning. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. What I find ironic is one of the things that Nigel Farage and other Brexiteers of his ilk were telling us consistently throughout the referendum campaign was that if we voted for Brexit, we would be securing sovereignty. We in this country would be taking back control. And now we see Nigel Farage running around saying, you know, forget that. We now have to go cap in hand to Donald Trump. And I am the person who is best placed to carry that cap. And the only person. And actually, what you should do is forget about the British Prime Minister, forget about our ambassador who's currently in post, look at what Donald Trump's saying, look at who he wants, look at who this leader of a foreign power wants, and then we have to do what he says, and hey presto, it just happens to be me who'll benefit from that.
Any ambassador should be. You
Exactly.
don't send the guy that that country wants over there. You send the guy that is going to do the best job for you.
But if not an ambassador, which I think even Nigel Farage would admit would be a bit of a stretch, shouldn't we be using his close connections with the Trump campaign?
We do not have to kiss up to a proto-fascist. We can say, we don't like you, Mr. Trump. All right, we can do trade deals or not do trade deals, but we don't have to actually generally get down on our knees and pucker up and give it a big old kiss.
And also, what is the nature of this close relationship with him? I mean, he went out, he spoke at one of his rallies. Yeah. I mean, he got a very nice. He got doing some advice. He got a very nice selfie with him. He got the first selfie with Donald Trump. And if we want to lead the world in selfies, then maybe he's the man. But in terms of serious diplomacy, I mean, someone who you wanted to be a diplomat on behalf of your nation in a literal sense or even a metaphorical sense. I mean, as Nigel Farage at least had the decency to admit himself, he's not exactly one of the world's most diplomatic people, is he?
Yes, and what happens if you get to a situation where there's something the ambassador would have to do, or any other job that Nigel could do, that is either acting in Britain's interest or in Trump's interest? Which way is he going to go? Is he going to go with us, or is he going to go with his mate Trump? And you know, he's also trying to be an unelected bureaucrat, which I was pretty certain he was against up till now.
Let's stay with the Express. First, I've got to say, natty leather trousers being sported by the Prime Minister there. Perhaps we will return to that topic in the press preview next hour. Let's turn to the front of the Mirror and a story we've covered quite extensively over the past few days, and understandably so. The chap there in the top left, Andy Woodward, I spoke to yesterday, and I have nothing but admiration for this man. You know, thanks to the interview that he gave to The Guardian, we now have a little look into just how much of an issue child abuse has been within football. And that really is the point of this front page. It is now down to the FA to tell us what it knew and when.
Yeah, and so much has been known, because unlike all the comparisons with the Savile scandal, you know, Savile was never charged or arrested or imprisoned. Brian Bennell served, I think, 3 different sentences for attacks on a number of boys. From 92 onwards, it was well known that something was going on. Alan Brazil's autobiography, in which he mentioned the attacks he was subject to, was published in 2007. We've heard that the executives at Crewe Alexandra had a meeting in the late 80s about this. So it is something that has been known. It's not just something in the style of Savile that's been, you know, rumours that were never substantiated. They were very much substantiated. It's what's happened is because we've had the subsequent, more recent paedophile scandals, that people are now feeling able to talk about this a little more openly than they did the first time around, and it's now seen as more relevant as well, with some hindsight, with knowing about what we know about Savile and the BBC and other things that have gone on, Rolf Harris and so on, that now the people are thinking, well, maybe this is as endemic as we've always feared, and it arguably is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you up to a point on all that, and I certainly agree with you about the courage of the victims having coming forward. But I do think we just have to be just a little bit careful with this at the moment. Now, obviously, I cover, you know, primarily cover politics. We have had very, very similar allegations made in relation to the political world, and we have seen very lurid headlines about organised paedophile rings, about abuse on a scale that dwarfed that of Savile, of stuff that was endemic, numbers of victims coming forward. We've had a number of the reputations of a number of senior politicians dragged into this. And the reality is that on closer inspection, a lot of those allegations have simply not stood up. They've been shown not to be true. Now, I'm not saying, for an instance, that any of the people there were not genuine victims, but I'm just saying, I mean, you've just talked, you know, there's a lot of speculation about the depth of this, about how serious it is, about what may or may not have been covered up, and I'm just saying, you know, we need to have proper processes to examine this, to actually get to the bottom of this in a measured way, and we just have to be a little bit careful. And I think one of the interesting things is, obviously, we have this. We're now being told we've got this independent FA investigation. We're also supposed to have an independent national investigation which is taking place at the moment, which has been established by the government, which is supposed to be looking across the board at these historic
they've said that their terms of reference will allow them to look into this as well.
Exactly, and I'm still not entirely clear yet, and I was on a different programme this morning speaking to one of the government ministers about this. They didn't seem entirely clear how these two inquiries will integrate, so that's one of the key things. The inquiries are going to have to be integrated in some way, but as I say, we do just have to be a little bit careful when we start going down this road.
Susie, Susie, take us to the front of the Telegraph and the story at the top there, the big Brexit summit that is upcoming.
Yeah, the EU must compromise. I look forward to seeing the day when the 27 member states of the EU have to get down on their bended knee and compromise with us. This is the upcoming summit between the Polish Premier and Theresa May, which is the first time they've had a sort of a summit, I suppose. They've had plenty of heads-to-heads previously, but they're calling it a summit, therefore they can call it the first. And they're going to be talking about Brexit, among other things. And, of course, they're saying the stuff you'd expect them to both say, which is we can forge a wonderful relationship, we're all going to be friends in the future, blah, blah. What's not in this anywhere, and it does run on inside the paper, which we can't see yet, is talk about citizenship rights and access and migration, because we have a large Polish minority in this country who have been extremely useful to our economy, and of course that is under some threat if there are migration controls after Brexit, and that's the main thing those two women are going to be talking about, and that's going to be the biggest issue, I should think, for both of them as well. Let's
go inside the Mirror, pages 4 and 5, and questions for the Football Association, and ones which they really do need to answer pretty quickly.
Yeah, the Mirror's got these 10 questions here about who knew what, when, and what you did about it fundamentally. And those are questions that have to be answered because the allegations go back over a number of years. There has been some convictions in the past. There has been some confirmation of some of the allegations already. So the fact that nothing seems to have been done does seem, in hindsight, to have been an oversight, shall we say. But there is a positive in all this. There's one good thing out of this story, which is that if you're a victim of abuse, it's incredibly hard to come forward. If you are a male victim of abuse, I think it's much more difficult to say that it's happened to you as well, because boys and men tend to feel that they should have fought off their attacker, and in the same way that girls sometimes are made to think that they, can't always do that. And lastly, in football, it's very, very difficult for anyone to talk about any kind of homosexual experience, whether it's consensual or whether it is, in some of these cases, attacks. And for a footballer who's been pro-footballers to come forward and to say, I've been the victim of a homosexual paedophile and it was non-consensual and all this stuff, I think is some kind of indication that as a society we've got onto a fairly good place in that we're able for these guys to come forward and to talk about it. One of them, I can't remember which one it was now, but said, can you imagine if I'd said at the time this happened to me, what the terraces would have done? 60,000 lads on the terraces would have torn me apart. I think if any of these guys were to go out, you know, if a Premier League footballer had said that this had happened to him and then went out to play a match, those 60,000 fans today would probably give him a standing ovation for speaking out. So we've come a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and I think there has been a suggestion that the sort of the quite macho culture within football has been one of the reasons why it's taken so long for this to come to light. And but again, I mean, you know, it's obviously positive that the FA seem to be now sort of obviously pushing forward with this investigation. But again, you know, the FA are a football authority. They are not, you know, they are not by nature an investigative body. And we've got these questions here. We've got, you know, the people saying, you know, the FA have to push forward with this. Well, obviously, this guy Barry Bennell obviously was arrested and charged with this sort of stuff. But it's quite clear there are suggestions there are other people out there who have not been uncovered, many of whom may still be alive. Where are the police in this process? You know, it does seem, you know, we seem to be outsourcing these sorts of investigations to sort of
well, that's
third
a bit
parties.
like saying that the BBC shouldn't have had to do anything about Savile because their business was broadcasting or something else. But you know, the allegations are that in some cases FA employees or football club employees didn't allow things to get as far as the police.
Let's return to the front page of the Telegraph, and we'll do two stories here to try and squeeze them in. Let's start with the one at the bottom right there, which does make me smile. Boris Johnson might be popping over for Fidel Castro's funeral.
Boris Johnson in Havana,
Surrounded
Castro's
by
funeral.
socialists.
What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly
Almost everything.
go wrong?
Probably.
Yes,
it is
you're
2016. Right. Goodness knows. But I think one of the interesting bits in that story is the second paragraph. It says that Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House in the US, and a Donald Trump confidant said under no circumstances should President Obama or John Kerry, their Secretary of State, attend the Cuban leaders.
That makes more sense, though, doesn't it, given the 5-decade-long trade embargo that
but Obama's
just
just loosened a lot of relations with Cuba, and Newt Gingrich, former Speaker, is in no position to tell the current president what he can or cannot do or what he should send his Secretary of State to do. It's grandiose in the extreme.
But Jeremy's going to be there. Jeremy Corbyn's going to be there on behalf of the Labour Party, and obviously, as we know, that's what the voters want to see, don't they? They want to see him hobnobbing.
How to destroy your election chances.
Yeah. One man who probably won't be there because he'll be too busy signing autographs. Ed Balls, the people's champion. Even David Cameron praised him for his performance.
Travesty. Shouldn't be off. Should still be in there.
He can't dance.
Judges got it wrong. Doesn't matter. He's been improving.
It kind of does matter.
He's been improving every week.
He's
been improving every week, and unlike almost everybody else in there, with the possible exception of Judge Rinder, he had no dance background, no music background. He could play the piano a bit, and he's actually managed to go in and dance in front of 10 million people.
He's found someone strong enough to give him a lift there as well to get him.
Ed Balls is now the most popular Labour politician in the country. I don't think this is the end for Ed Balls. I think this could just be the beginning.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Susie, Dan, thank you both very much for joining us on the Press Review once again. Time for us to look at the weather.
As a warm day ends in Africa, delicious aromas fill a steamy evening in Asia.
And I'm afraid it's going to be turning colder over the next few days. For now, though, Britain having a bright start to Monday. Patchy frost, some fog in the north. Ireland and Northern Ireland will be much cloudier and mostly frost-free. The morning will be dry just about everywhere, although a few showers are possible. Britain will see good sunny spells, best in the far north and south, but Northern Ireland and Ireland will be quite cloudy. Most places will see temperatures around page 2 of the Express, and the headlines that we all want to read.
This is good. This is fantastic. We should be working longer. We are living longer. The fact that people want to sit down at the age of 60 or 65 and take the next 30 years off while someone else is paying for them to have 2.5% pension rises every year, even if inflation and wage rises are not keeping up with that, is unsustainable economically. Pensions are the biggest benefit in the system that we have, that we pay out, and you have to have enough people underneath paying the taxes to provide the pension. And frankly, one of the expert here is saying that, you know, when the government raised the pension age to 67 in 2028, there was not a squeak of protest anywhere in the country, and that effectively took £8,000 off every single person. And he said this is the best way to take £8,000 round off millions of voters because they don't appear to notice. It's well down the track. It's 20, 30, 40 years, and people do not mind at the moment this is going to happen. By the time we all get to 70, it's going to be normal that we are all still working. My father worked for 10 years past retirement age. It's done him absolutely no harm at all.
But what I think is interesting, I mean, if you look at this story and underpinning it, and you can see in the box there, is this sort of new fears over pledge to triple lock. Now, this is obviously one of the things that came out of the autumn statement, was Philip Hammond floating the prospect that obviously the famous triple lock could potentially be unpicked.
Because we've had Ros Altman talking about it in the past. We had Stephen Crabb as well recently as well.
Exactly, and it's quite interesting. I was speaking to a number of backbench Tory MPs and a couple of ministers this week, and I was saying to them, is it really conceivable that you as a party could go into the next general election with a commitment to unpicking the triple lock, given the importance of pensioners to the Conservative vote? And to a man and a woman, they looked at me and said, no chance.
No, but after the election, they'll do it then.
Well, I'm not even sure they'd do it after the election either.
Someone's got to at some point. Someone has to unpick that because it's not financially
it's
sustainable.
It's not going to be a Conservative Prime Minister.
I was going to say, you probably want to secure a slightly larger majority before going for that one.